Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're happy you could join us. My name is Naya Hyde and I'm the marketing assistant for the K-12 education products here at Brooks Publishing. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. You'll be muted for the webinar, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box. We'll take these questions after the presentation during the Q&A portion of the webinar. For the presentation, you might want to minimize the GoToWebinar bar on your monitor so you can see more of your screen. You can do that by clicking the orange button with the arrow in the top corner of the control bar. If you need to enlarge the bar again to ask a question, you can just click the orange button again. If you experience any audio issues at any point, you can switch the phone by clicking in the audio section of the webinar panel and using the dial-in information provided. Also, we are recording this webinar. Everyone who registered for the event will receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email tomorrow. During today's presentation, Jennifer Mahdavi will reference content from her book, A Teacher's Guide to Progress Monitoring, Track Goals to Refine Instruction for All Students. As new federal mandates require that schools help every child make progress, it's more important than ever for teachers to collect data regularly, make data-based instructional decisions, and monitor students' progress towards goals. This is the practical, teacher-friendly guide you need to harness the power of progress monitoring and uncover what it is and isn't working in your classroom. Ideal for educators in K-12 classrooms, but also applicable to preschool and transition programs, this urgently needed guide is your key to using progress monitoring to comply with federal mandates, refine your teaching, and help every learner achieve success. To learn more about the book, we will put the URL in the chat box so you can access that. I'm happy to announce that Brooks will be giving away 3 copies of Jennifer Mahdavi's book, A Teacher's Guide to Progress Monitoring. Winners will be announced after the webinar and they will be randomly selected. To increase your chances, be sure to submit your questions in the questions pane throughout the presentation. Also, we did want to mention that in the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a short survey. We would love to know what you thought of the webinar, and anyone who completes the survey will be entered to win a copy of Jennifer's book. Everyone watching this webinar will be able to download a certificate of attendance. For those of you watching live, you may download your certificate from the handouts pane in your GoToWebinar control panel, and live attendees will also be emailed their certificate in the next 24 hours. For those of you who are watching this webinar as a recording, stay tuned to the end of today's webinar to learn how to access your certificate. Without further delay, I'm happy to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Jennifer Mahdavi has been a professor and teacher educator at the university level for nearly 2 decades. She earned her doctorate in special education from the University of California, Riverside, and she is a board-certified behavior analyst. Her expertise is in assessment, database, intervention decisions, and behavior management. Building on 10 years of experience teaching elementary schools, Dr. Mahdavi is committed to making the lives of individuals with disabilities better by bringing research to practice. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I am going to share my screen. All right, I am hoping that what you are looking at now says task analysis learning objectives. Can someone confirm that for me?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, perfect. That was the hardest part right there. Well, I'm very happy to be with you today and to give you a short discussion about task analysis, which I think is just such a powerful tool and technique for individuals with disabilities and for their special education teachers. I have 4 objectives to meet with you in the next 25 or 30 minutes about constructing a task analysis, charting student performance on each element, analyzing performance to make database instructional decisions, and using task analysis to conduct efficient progress monitoring. So when I think about task analysis, really what it is, it's breaking a task down into its very simplest parts. We're going to be using an example today about brushing your teeth. And rather than just thinking about brushing your teeth as an entire activity, we can break it down into small pieces so that we can teach those pieces. And when we do that, we can see where a student is having trouble and where are they getting stuck. And when I think about that particular bullet point, I remember being a child in school, and I remember my teachers asking me when I was stuck, usually in math, what don't you understand about this? They would say to me. And as a child, I was so perplexed by that question, because if I knew what I didn't understand, I wouldn't be stuck. So I never really knew what to tell my teachers. And I'm not sure that asking children that question is helpful, but if we as teachers have done our task analysis, we can see where the child is struggling. We can see what each step is, and we can observe that child as they are working through each step, and then decide where they're stuck rather than the children. And it also helps us decide which skills to teach and in what order we need to be teaching them. So don't be that teacher. What don't you understand about this? It's just not helpful. Always in working with children with disabilities and being a teacher, we really want to pay attention to what's an evidence-based practice, what's been demonstrated in the literature to be an effective way to reach children, not just what someone posted on the internet, but what is an evidence-based practice. And there is a pretty ample evidence base for task analysis. It has been used pretty extensively for teaching individuals with autism. And there have been articles about teaching children with autism play and social skills, teaching them how to use better communication skills, and also with academic and transition skills. There's also an extensive evidence base for how to use task analysis to teach Common Core skills. So math can be broken down into steps pretty easily, and also how to use the internet to find information that you need. Self-regulated strategy development is something that many special educators are familiar with. It's the Harris and Graham strategies for writing instruction. And those are task analysis. They have a really extensive evidence base. And another particular area where we see a good evidence base for task analysis is in teaching functional and physical skills. It's really common to use this with kids with more severe disabilities, teaching them how to use the microwave, teaching them how to fold laundry, because none of us have minions that are going to fold our laundry for us. We all need to learn how to do that. And also teaching self-determination skills. And I know I ran through that really quickly. If you want citations for that, you have the PowerPoint that's right there. You can download and have a look. And these are some of the articles that support the assertions that I have just made. So if you want to read up on any of those evidence-based practices, please do. I encourage you to really pay attention to what's going on there in the research. So given that we know task analysis is an evidence-based practice and it can be an effective way to teach children with disabilities, this particular slide is giving you, it's basically a task analysis of task analysis. So these are 6 steps that we can use to develop a task analysis to use in our own classrooms and to become just more powerful teachers. These first 2 steps involve really becoming just familiar with what the skill is. What is it that we want the child to be able to do? What's the task? And like I said, in this particular presentation, we're going to use the skill of brushing your teeth. You want to have a clear vision and a specific definition so that everybody who is working with that child, whether it's their parents, the paraprofessional, or you yourself, understand what the task is, what the skill is, and what it's going to look like, so that if everyone would be able to say, yes, that is brushing your teeth. Once we know what that skill is, then we need to think about the prerequisite skills that the student has to possess before we start working on it. And that's the foundation that the child is bringing. If we don't want to start teaching a skill like toothbrushing at too high a level, because the child's going to fail if we do it that way. So when I was thinking about toothbrushing, some of the prerequisite skills I was thinking about were the child needs to have some particular motor skills. They need to be able to hold that toothbrush. They need to be able to open the lid of the toothbrush. So if it's a flip top, if it's a screw top, if it's a pump, they need to be able to operate that. An interesting one is being able to provide the right amount of pressure on the tube to squeeze it. Also turning on the faucet would be something that the child would need. So those are just some of the motor skills. And if your student that you want to teach how to brush their teeth is missing any of those motor skills, probably what you need to do is back up and work on those skills and then come forward to the next one, the toothbrushing. In addition, in this particular example, I really feel strongly that understanding directionality is important, because when you're brushing your teeth, you need to understand up and down, front and back, and also side to side, so that the child can follow those directions. If we don't get our prerequisite skills described properly, then sometimes the child will fail at a step, and then we have to back up. On the other side, don't get too worried about being excessively specific with your prerequisite skills. I've had students in the past where they're working on developing these task analyses, and they want to have a reading comprehension task analysis, but they try to define every prerequisite skill, like can read short vowels, can read long vowels, can segment and blend. Well, that's way too many. So if the prerequisite skill is basic reading ability at the 3rd grade level, that encompasses all of that. So think about those prerequisite skills carefully and make sure that they are kind of appropriate to the job that you're doing. So how do you even find these steps? That's the next 2 things. List the steps that you're going to follow for the skill. And I think of it, I like to cook, and when I'm cooking, I will go search the internet for recipes, and I read a whole bunch of recipes. I cooked a lamb shake last week, and I looked at a whole bunch of recipes for how to cook one, and what spices to use, and how long to cook it. And I didn't follow any of those recipes. I read all of those recipes, and then I decided what I wanted to do that I thought would taste delicious, and it did, by the way. So you might make your own task analysis by searching the internet. If you put into the internet web bar, the search bar, task analysis of whatever the thing is that you want to work on, you'll find lots of hits that you can sort of sort through and see if they work. You could also watch videos of proficient people doing that skill, or even just pay attention to how you do that skill, so that you can write those steps up. So making a cup of tea, start with something simple, making a grilled cheese sandwich. Those are kind of good practice task analyses. And then before you try to teach a child how to do the task in this way, or before you try to teach your paraprofessionals who are going to help this child, you need to pilot that task analysis. Take it out for a test spin, see if you can create a situation in which you can follow all the directions and everyone understands. Is there an error in the definition? Is there a step that you left out? And you can revise your task analysis as you need to. So on this next slide, here are the 10 steps that I came up with for toothbrushing. And as you read through them, maybe it's not exactly how you do it. This is how I do it. It's what works for me. I live in California, so turning off the faucet is a really important part, because we don't let the water run while we brush our teeth, because we're living in a constant state of drought. When I first wrote this task analysis and shared it with some students in the class that I'm teaching at the university, I neglected to write turn off the faucet here at the beginning, turn on the faucet and wet toothbrush. And my students were really quick, also Californians, really quick to let me know, nah, you got to turn off the faucet and then turn it back on again. Now look, there are tons of different ways to brush your teeth, and you can create your own steps. I know for sure I'm a backpacker, and I go backpacking for several days at a time. And we do brush our teeth when we're out there in the wilderness. There's no sink, there's no faucet. So I can still get my teeth brushed even without these specific steps. So do keep that in mind. Whatever it is you're doing, there are many ways to get it done. And then we have a task analysis. Great. Now it's time to take that task analysis into the classroom, or I guess now virtually through distance learning for a lot of us. And any usual teaching technique that you use is an appropriate technique. So in special education, one really great evidence-based practice is direct instruction, explicit instruction, where it's I do all of the steps, I talk through doing the steps, I model the entire thing. And then there's a we do, where the student and I are working together and we're talking through it and I'm providing prompting. And then eventually we get to the you do, where the student goes off on their own to do the activity. Also in applied behavior analysis, we talk about task analysis, and each step in the task analysis, it's a behavioral chain. So you can think of these steps, these 10 steps here as a chain. And we can teach our students beginning almost anywhere in the chain. We can teach them from step 1 through step 10. And that makes a lot of sense. It's sequential, but we do not actually have to teach sequentially. For kids who need a lot of reinforcement, maybe we start by teaching, we work through together steps 1 through 9. And when we get to step 10, we let the child do that one step and then give them an ample reinforcement for just turning off the faucet. And then they feel very successful and happy, and they're very willing the next time it comes around to do steps 1 through 9. And then we have them rinse the sink and the toothbrush. So we can go backwards in that way, we can go forwards. And actually we can even, because it's task analyzed, we can do it from the middle. If we can observe, and we'll look at that in the next slide, observe which steps they do independently already, and then we don't have to waste time teaching those steps, which is one of my very favorite things about task analysis. Is it takes a lot of time to set it up, but it saves time in the teaching. We want to use task analysis for progress monitoring. The whole topic of my book is about progress monitoring. So of course, this is the direction that I'm going to go when we want to think about which steps the students need to master. So we've got these 10 steps for brushing your teeth. We don't have to spend any time teaching the 3 steps the student can already do alone. We are going to use prompting with our students, but we want to make sure that we use the least possible amount of prompting because we don't want to create children who are prompt dependent. And all of us who are in special education or in teaching have worked with children who are prompt dependent. They have learned helplessness, and they are not capable. They don't have the sense of self-advocacy and self-efficacy to be able to move forward without looking to you. So they want you to tell them the next step all of the time. They want you to help them do the next thing. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for independence. So we want to use the fewest and least intrusive prompts possible. When a child is independent, they don't need any assistance at all to do that step. So you can record that on your data sheet, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, with the letter I or the number 0. Verbal and signed prompts. So a verbal prompt, sometimes in classrooms, it can sound like nagging. It's reminding students. Remember to put your name on your paper. Put your name on the paper, or taking kids and going to picture schedules, signing, using sign language. We're not demonstrating the skill, we're not showing them what to do, we're just reminding them. On your recording sheet, you might record a V or a number 1. And when we record a 1, when we record these numeric pieces of data, it's a Likert scale. It's not the number of prompts that we're reporting. We're reporting the amount of intrusiveness. So a 0 is not intrusive at all. A 1 is minimally intrusive. A 2 is a little bit more. I hope that makes sense. Usually I would ask my students at this point to smile and nod just so that I feel good, but all I can see right now is the screen. So I hope you're smiling and nodding out there. A modeled prompt is the next most intrusive. So that would be maybe saying to them what they need to do as well as showing. So miming that skill. And then physical guidance is the most intrusive thing we do. We are literally getting into that child's space to help them move forward. A lot of special education teachers are quite familiar with using hand over hand, touching the child's elbow, repositioning their fingers in a pencil grip, maybe in toothpaste, using toothpaste, putting your hand over their hand to help them apply the right amount of pressure to squeeze the toothpaste out. And that's very intrusive. So again, when we're doing our recording, a 3 would be intrusive. It's not the number of prompts that we gave for that step. It's just that we gave the most intrusive prompt, less not very intrusive and independent. So here is this behavior, this chart that we can use, and you can fill it in with your steps. We're working on with the fictional student Susan, and she is working on toothbrushing. Here's our key: 0 for independent, just like I was talking about on the previous slide, 1 for signed, 2 for modeled, 3 for physical. I'm going to talk about this circle in a minute. I like to list the steps, and this will become clear as I speak through the slide. I like to start the steps with number 1 written at the bottom. So 1 down here is turn on the faucet, take the cap off, and the very last step is at the top here. And then each time we work through this, this task, this job, we want to indicate the level of prompting that we're using for each step along the way. And I think the real beauty of task analysis and the beauty of keeping data like this is that you can begin to see over time whether the child is making progress. Whether a child can brush their teeth or use the toilet independently or write an essay, it's not binary. It's not a yes or a no, they can do it. There are shades of gray. There's a continuum of ability. So when we indicate the level of prompting for each step, we're really getting a very nuanced view of how this child is doing. So in this particular case, on September 1st, Susan was able independently to turn on the faucet and turn it off. And then you can see as you go up where she was needing more assistance. So she was having full physical guidance for moving the toothbrush inside the mouth, and for squeezing the toothpaste, and for rinsing the sink and toothbrush. So that's a lot of support, whereas maybe a little bit less support for some of the other steps. And each time you practice, you can take these data. And when you look at this as a whole, you can start to see how she is making progress, and that the later times are made, you can see that this is less prompting. You can see that we've moved from lots of 3s and 2s to lots of 1s. And still on this day, we're seeing that Susan is not completely independent with her toothbrushing, but we can also see that she's made tremendous growth over just a few days. This is fictional data, by the way. I really hope that your data will look this promising when you start taking it yourself. Now, here's the part about this that I find completely brilliant, and also my students seem to have a very hard time following this line of reasoning, but stay with me for a minute here. So not only do I want to see each individual step and how Susan can perform on each particular step, but I want to see how she's making progress with her independence. So these circles that are on the graph are indicating how many steps she completed independently. So on this day, on 9/1, she completed 1 step independently. And so I put a dot on 1. It's not that she did step 1 necessarily independently, although in this case she did. It's that she did 1 step independently. And by putting number 1 down here, it just helps you keep that in mind. And what we're doing each time we put on a dot is we're actually building a graph right onto the same piece of paper. So on the second day, there were 2 steps, step 10 and step 1 that Susan did independently. And so we put a circle or a dot on 2. On the third day, she did step 1 and step 2 and step 10 again. So that's 2 steps independently. On this particular day, there were 1, 2, 3, 4 independent steps. So here on 4, that's independent. And then on this last day of data, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 independent days. And so that puts a dot on number 5. And you can see here very visually, it's very clear how she is making progress with becoming more independent. I really love that part because I think it's just efficient, and I know you're busy as teachers. So having this kind of charting, I think, is really helpful. The other thing that we can do and we can chart is just the total number of points. We can add up each day how many prompts. It's not number of prompts, again, it's kind of making a Likert scale. So if we consider 3 to be the top, like, most intrusive way of prompting for each step, and we have 10 steps, that's easy math. It's 30 possible points. And we can add them up. So we have 2 and 3 is 5, 8, 11, 13, 15, 17, 20, 21, and that's 21 up here. And as we go through, we can continue to add them up. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points worth of prompting, 5. So here again, just we can see how the magnitude of prompting has decreased over time. We can see how the independence has increased over time. And this is just one example with toothbrushing. We can do this same kind of activity with all sorts of different tasks. The other thing that we can see when we look at these data are where it is that we need to concentrate our time. So if we look at here where the full physical prompting was, you can see how that was paid attention to and how that decreased over time. So at first it was full physical prompting, a little less, and then it was just verbal or reminders. So I find like this form is just the total package that you need for your teaching in a strange way, because it really gets back to that question at the beginning where the teacher says, what part don't you understand? With this chart, I can take data and I can see where the child is getting stuck very clearly. And that's the parts, that's the way I can spend time with that child. That's where I can get started with my teaching, which is kind of what this particular little sticky note on the side reminds us of. I think I've talked through all of those points, except maybe the last one, which says, are our teaching techniques effective? So teaching and learning have 2 parts. One is whether the child is learning, but also is our teaching effective for this student? And I think that that's a really important thing to think about. We can use an evidence-based practice, and for 50 children, that evidence-based practice will work. And then Susan comes along and that practice does not work, and we need a new way to approach teaching. And I think that we need to be strong enough and confident enough in our own teaching to take the time to think about whether what we are doing is working for our students. And it's not just about what's worked with everybody else I've ever taught, so it should be working with you. It'd be nice if life were that simple, but when we're special education teachers, that specially designed instruction is what we're all about. So take advantage of this to see if the techniques you're using for your teaching are effective for that particular child that you're working with. And just to sort of finalize this, we've gone through this entire web broadcast thinking about what children can do sort of functionally or in daily living skills. But also we can use task analysis for academic skills. We can use task analysis to describe things that are a little more complex that children need to achieve. If you've ever had a middle school kid have to write an essay, what does that even mean? Teachers say write an essay and they think the kids can just work that out. Well, that's not the case. You need to help them understand what are each of the steps that it takes to actually write an essay. We can use task analysis to help children understand the strategy that they need to use to approach something. Maybe the strategy of how to read a text and understand it, the strategy that you need to use to engage in a number talk in your mathematics class. Things that are a habit of mind rather than discrete steps. And I mean, this does work across every grade level. I teach master's degree candidates how to write literature reviews. And writing a literature review in graduate school is a very specific skill. You take a very specific voice when you're doing that. And I can't just tell, even though these people are college graduates and they're in a master's degree program, I still need to provide them some scaffolding to how to write a lit review. And I basically task analyzed that and I present it to my students in chunks. The example that you see on this particular slide is about writing a sentence. It's just 6 steps. I could really see you using with 2nd or 3rd graders, this particular set of steps. If you had steps that you liked better, you could certainly use those instead. But I wanted to give an example of what this looks like for kids that are learning academic skills. And I think that's one of the tremendous strengths of task analysis, is that you can use it on just about everything from self-feeding and toileting to how to ride a city bus or use public transportation, all the way through writing a literature review in graduate school. And then there's a lot more stuff about how to use this for progress monitoring, but that I think would be a whole nother webinar, or you could buy my book. I will be happy to ask questions, which means I think I need to bring Nia back and stop sharing my screen.
Awesome, great presentation. Learned a lot of great stuff. We did have a few questions, so we'll hop right in. Again, anyone who has questions, please feel free to add them to the questions pane in your GoToWebinar control panel. So one of the first questions we got is, can this be used with goals for homework completion or eloping?
I think for work completion, absolutely. When you have a child, you know, I'm a behavior analyst too, so I think about the functions. Sometimes children have a hard time with work completion because they don't understand how to do work completion. You could do a task analysis of what are the habits of mind, what are the executive functioning skills that you need to complete work. And sometimes those things, you know, like I sit down in my chair, I look at my paper, or, you know, whatever that might look like. For eloping, you know, again, as a behavior analyst, I would go to what's the function of that behavior. And then you have to address the function of the behavior. So why is the child choosing to run away? And then you could analyze the steps that you would need to follow to solve your problem without running away. I hope that helps the questioner. I don't know if they want.
Great response. Great response. We'll let you know if I get any comments in the chat or anything. Another question: how do you know if a task has been broken down too far?
If it's so complicated that you can't follow it, it's been broken down too far. And you know, sometimes I think that's part of piloting, figuring out where those mistakes are. Sometimes you break it down too far, and you'll figure that out pretty quickly. The problem I think that we see more often is that we don't break it down nearly enough, so that we get to a place and it's like, well, why is the kid getting stuck on step 3? And when that happens, then you have to go back and analyze step 3. So you can kind of task analyze and task analyze and task analyze for a long time.
Got it. Okay. Great response. The person who just asked the previous question said, yes, that was helpful.
And I saw her name, Christy.
Another question. Does prompting count when you're initially teaching the concept?
Sorry, ask again?
Does prompting count when you're initially teaching the concept?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say no. You probably want to have a trial where the teaching is separate from the assessment. So, you know, you do your teaching and the prompting is part of your teaching, and then you try to stand back and watch them go through and take the data. And don't let them get stuck too long on any particular step. So you might, you know, wait 3 seconds, wait 5 seconds to see if they move on to the next step. And then if they don't, then you prompt. And I would record the highest or most intrusive prompt.
Okay. Another great response. Do you determine prerequisite skills through observation? Someone said they're working with preschool age children, so they're teaching lots of prerequisite skills.
Yes. Well, I mean, everything that we do has a prerequisite skill. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great question to think about. What does it look like for a preschooler compared to someone in a master's degree program? And certainly when you think about your preschoolers, they're going to have some level of fine and gross motor skills to do particular things, some level of ability to maintain eye contact and to talk to one another. So yeah, we can break it down that far. I think the important thing to remember is I did not need to break down my graduate level task analysis all the way back down to preschool. And with preschool, you don't need to break it all the way back down to what you would expect a 12-month-old to do. So, okay. I mean, I don't think task analysis is an exact science when it comes to what your task analysis looks like. And we just make all of our best attempts. So you think that you've identified all the prerequisite skills, and then you start to teach whatever it is that you were trying to teach. And then you realize, oh, there's the skill I didn't even think of that should have been included in the prerequisite, should have been included in the task analysis. So I wouldn't feel bad about that. I would always be working back and forth to think about, is this working? Do I need to revise my task analysis? And like I said before, sometimes a task analysis that you've been using for several years very effectively with lots of kids will come to a place where it doesn't work for this kid at all. It's frustrating, but it's also
great response. Yeah, you got to tailor it. That makes sense. I think we'll ask a few more questions just to be conscious of everyone's time. Somebody asked, how would you work through a task analysis process if the child is not engaged and does not want to participate?
I hate to keep going back to behavior analysis, but it really does color everything I do. I would want to know, why aren't they engaged and why don't they want to participate? When I think about myself, I was never a very athletic kid, and I was especially bad in middle school at volleyball. Really, it was about the worst thing I ever had to do because I just didn't have any sense of how to engage with that. And so in self-defense, I disengaged. I'm not going to play volleyball. You can't make me play volleyball. So I think a lot of times kids disengage because it's too hard and they don't have skills that they need to get into whatever it is that we've asked them to do. And if we can use task analysis and we can use assessment to figure out where their strengths are to build on, then maybe they'll be more willing to get involved. If we can figure out what skills we need to teach them to support them in moving through it, they might feel more willing. And I wish I knew how old those kids were from that questioner. I mean, definitely I see it a lot in kind of middle school kids. They become very defended about their skills and abilities, and they've experienced so much failure in their lives that
Mm.
the safest thing to do is just to say they don't care, to be apathetic. I'm just, and I'm now guessing, I don't know if that's the case with the,
Great response.
oh, but the child was preschool age, is that what that says? I don't know.
Yes, it does. Child is preschool age.
Sometimes you just got to figure out what's the thing that lights their fire too. So
Mm-hmm.
child-centered learning can also help of, what's the thing that they want to learn. I know there are certain things they have to learn how to do. It's important to learn how to toilet, and sometimes kids aren't that interested in learning how to toilet.
Mm-hmm.
And here's maybe oversharing, and I think my mom might watch this later. I apparently, as a very small child, I didn't toilet train as early as people thought I should have. And my mother tells the story that she would tell people that eventually I would work it out. And I did. I'm very independent now. It's fine. So sometimes I think, thinking about preschoolers, like, are they developmentally ready for that? And are we pushing them a little bit too hard to overshare?
Love the person. Right. No, it's great. I think that'll be our last question for today because it is 2:42. So we can head over to the next slide. Thank you for your great responses. That's awesome. If we have more questions, we'll be sure to get those to you after the presentation. Thanks, everyone. So I just want to remind everyone watching this webinar that you will be able to download a certificate of attendance. So everyone watching live, you can download your certificate from the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. And then live attendees, you'll also be emailed your certificate in the next 24 hours as well. I also want to remind everyone that they'll be prompted to complete a short survey at the end of the conclusion or the end of this presentation. We would love to know what you thought of the webinar, and anyone who completes the survey also has a chance to be entered to win a free copy of Jennifer's amazing book. So definitely complete that survey. And then I'd also, again, like to remind everyone that we are offering a 20% off discount on our products, including Jennifer's book, A Teacher's Guide to Progress Monitoring, through the end of January. Anyone who watches this webinar or the recording can use the code COFFEECHAT at checkout to receive the discount. And if you're looking for more professional development webinar opportunities over the coming weeks, be sure to visit Books Publishing's website for the latest additions to our Coffee Chat series. We're hosting chats every Wednesday with our esteemed authors, and we would love for you to join us. For additional support, you can visit the link on your screen. On this page, you'll find a collection of recommended reading, downloadable resources, other professional development webinars from Brooks and our leading organizations. And just one last reminder for everyone watching live, you can download a certificate from the handouts pane, like we said earlier, and you'll also be emailed the certificate in the next 24 hours. And for those of you who are watching this webinar as a recording, you can follow the link on your screen to access your certificate of attendance as well. Thank you everyone who attended. We really appreciate you spending your afternoon with us. And Jennifer, you did great once again. We really appreciate you taking this time. And yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great day.